Hey, welcome to branding class. It is our last episode for the summer here, and I couldn't be more excited to look at what we're looking at today. If you checked out the description at all or the thumbnail, you might have noticed that we are going to be doing some vector redrawing of a piece of lettering that I sketched up on the iPad. And this kind of brings things all back around to the beginning of kind of what we were looking at here. We've got this district that I work for, Leander ISD, is a pretty large district as far as Texas school districts go. Not by any means the largest, but it's up there. We've got about 50 campuses roughly between your comprehensive schools and some alternative schools and stuff. So it's a lot of moving parts, a lot of different entities needing design help and everything. And for the last 6 months or so, I've been there as pretty much the sole designer in the entire organization. So what's up, everybody? We've got Delo Designs in the chat, Jack, of course, as well. And I am following along there. If you guys aren't in the Discord, definitely jump in there. We've got a special group in there for branding class under active shows. So definitely jump in there and get active in the chat in there. Ask any questions you might have, whatever. I'll be keeping an eye on everything and looking to see what your questions are so I can make sure I answer them. And yeah, so we're going to be doing this piece of lettering today. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to my Illustrator here. I've got this pulled up here. Now, the tagline for Leander ISD is "Leading to a Bright Future." It is present in our branding a lot of times when we use that version of the logo, and so what I wanted to do here was I wanted to design a shirt. Originally, we designed this for potential use as a shirt for going to a Texas school communications conference in San Antonio in February, but then we ended up going with something a little bit simpler and saving this for a future thing. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of play on that tagline of leading to a bright future. And one of the things that I like to do anytime I'm designing any kind of merch for, whether it be one of my personal brands or maybe something for somebody I'm working for, is to go beyond just throwing the logo on a t-shirt, right? That's definitely one thing you can do. If you've got a really strong brand, that's great. But what I like to do is to make any piece of merch that I design do a little bit more, mean a little bit more. And I feel like with great taglines and things that you have with your brand, like you can kind of play with the meanings of those, play with the wording a little bit, and get creative. So with this one, I took that "leading to a bright future" tagline, and I thought, okay, what if I'm somebody that works for the district and I'm wearing a shirt that is ostensibly Leander ISD merch, right? What's something that could be cool, a nice phrase that I could letter that would be meaningful or, tie into that brand some way other than just throwing the logo on a shirt. And so I came up with this idea of putting on this shirt, "Follow me to a brighter future," right? So if we as employees of the school district are wanting to be seen or wanting to do things with that tagline in mind, with that idea in mind of leading the students, the families of those students, the community to a brighter future, then if I'm somebody who works there and I'm wearing this shirt, maybe follow me, because that's what we're trying to do here, is lead to a brighter future. So that's where the idea for this came from, and the way that I decided to go with this piece of merch design to make it do a little bit more, and not just advertise the brand exclusively, but have a little bit of a deeper meaning as well, and something that's a little clever and make people remember it, right? So okay, so we are in Illustrator here. I've got my sketch layer on top of the black background. If you were with us for the last few weeks here, I mentioned how I like working in light colors on dark backgrounds. I feel like it just provides more of a contrast and helps with things like figuring out your spacing and your balance and everything like that. So so I've got this pulled in here, and one of the great things about Illustrator now is that you can just zoom in infinitely. So even if I have like a sketch, which again, this is just a sketch from my iPad, and I usually take my sketches on the iPad further than I absolutely need to, so I can make my life in Illustrator a lot easier. But you can see if I zoom all the way in here, it's not a clean vector edged piece of lettering here. It's a sketch. So we're going to go ahead and make it vector here. And so, yeah, we can see some of my curves here are less than ideal. So I've got that sketch in here on top of just a black rectangle. And then I've got my opacity of the sketch itself dropped down to like 35% is usually where I go. And then I've got a new layer created on top of that. And I'm going to I'm going to make sure that I've got my direct selection tool selected first, and then go to my pen tool. And from now on, I probably won't click those buttons anymore. I'm going to use my keyboard shortcuts because that is the way to live. And yeah, and we're going to dive in here. So with that direct selection tool having been selected last, that means that I've now got that available to me anytime I press the command key as a shortcut. So what's up, Kazi? And yeah, I mean, I guess that's all we've got in there. We got Jack. Jack put the link to the Discord in there, so definitely check that out. I'm trying to pull up the Behance chat as well. It always hides from me. Let's see here, so that I can make sure I've got that available to talk with you guys. Maybe, no, I am logged in. Okay. Anyways, we will, I don't know, I'll figure that out later. Jack, if you could please pass along any comments from the Behance chat like you did last week. That was awesome and very helpful, and I appreciate you very much for that. I want to make sure that I don't miss any of those comments or questions. Okay, so now we're back in Illustrator here, and we are going to just dive right in here. I'm going to zoom all the way in because Illustrator lets me just get all up in the nitty gritty here without any kind of lag or anything. Love that. And I'm just going to start right on the edge of this guy. I'm going to pick a corner and get to it. So I'm going to start out here, come up to this guy. Oops, I've got a black fill and no stroke. Let's go ahead. We'll switch that by hitting Shift X, and then I'm going to make this stroke white for now. Cool. There we go. That's better. And then I'll just keep on trucking. Get down here. And if this is your first time joining us, I always like to mention that there is a default setting that I always like to change in Illustrator to make the way that I use the pen tool possible and just much easier and make a lot more sense to me in my mind. And that is to turn on the checkbox in general, or let's see. I always gotta look. Let's see, general, I think. No, selection and anchor display, and that constrain path dragging on segment reshape. That is going to change your life if you've never checked that on. What that does is it makes it so that when I set these anchors at those angles that I want, I can hold command here and I can just click and drag right on that segment, and I can move it all around, and it doesn't change the angles of those handles that I set. Super, super helpful when drawing anything with vector, I think, but definitely with lettering in my experience. So I'm going to keep on going with this guy here. Anytime we're looking at drawing an S curve, you don't get that kind of dragging on the segment that is very helpful for just simple curves, but you can kind of place those points, work with the handles individually there. And all right, keep going here. And I go back and forth between fixing these segments as I go, and alternately going through and plotting points and then coming back and fixing them all. I don't know, just kind of a mood thing. Just depends on what I'm feeling that day. So for right now, oops, I broke my path here. There we go. All right, now I will keep fixing these paths as I go so I can keep track of how I'm looking here. Go. Sometimes in a situation like this, I'll try skipping a point and just coming all the way down here, for instance, and see how that works. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes the curve just doesn't allow it. But I tell you what, if it does work for a particular curve, then the fewer anchors that you have at the end of the day, the easier it is, like night and day difference, to make changes later on. If you've got a ton of anchor points going on to create a path that you've been working on and then you need to change something later on, it can be really, really annoying if you've got a bunch floating around there. And with fewer points, it is much, much easier to make changes in a neat and uncomplicated way. All right, moving right along here. Coming down to this side here. Okay, and I'm going to try and skip that one again, just see how it goes. It lucked out last time, and we'll see if we have the same kind of luck this time. Pretty good. I like it. Okay, you know what? Let's go third time's a charm. Let's see if we can skip this one over here now. We might be pushing our luck. We'll see. Dude. Part of this is the way that I've drawn these curves, and just kind of like from the experience of doing that so many times, I'll often start to draw these curves originally, like sort of the way that they end up being represented in Vector, right? What's up? Welcome to the chat. And actually, I can see that this little spot right here feels like it doesn't match this curve because it has this point here on the side and this side doesn't. I'm going to try and see if I can get away with removing this. Now, if I click this right here while I have the pen tool selected, we can see that little minus sign show up there. That means it'll remove that, but it will do so without respecting anything I've got going on with the curve there. So if I switch actually to the, what is it called? Let's see here. Delete anchor point tool. Okay. Basic enough. By hitting just the, I just hit the minus key on the keyboard, which is the shortcut for that. Makes sense. And I actually learned this from one of the developers on the Illustrator team at one of the community summits at Max a couple years ago. I was asking if this could be a feature, and he explained to me that it totally is in there, and I should have known that, and I definitely should have. He didn't say that I should have known that. He was very nice. But anyway, so I've got my delete anchor point tool selected, and if I come over here and I hold the shift key, and then I click that, it does its best to respect the curve that's in place there and just remove that anchor point from the equation without changing anything any more than it absolutely has to. So that did a pretty good job. We can see here that my handles there are a little uneven the way that it laid it out, and it kind of looks like it in the curve there. So what I will do is I will kind of move that one back a little bit, move this one, whoops, move this one out a little bit. And that's pretty good. And I think it's going to ultimately match that outside curve a little bit better now that they have the same points in the same place. Okay, so let me go back to my pen tool by hitting the P key. Pro tip, D-Lo says, I think so too. I was like stunned that that was just hiding in there. I don't know how long it had been there. I know it wasn't like too terribly long, but it was long enough to where I was just like, man, I could have been using this whole time. That is a little annoying, but I'm happy to have that tool in my my toolbox for sure. Okay, so I'm going to try skipping a point again. Let's see how crazy we can get today. Okay, and then we'll drag that sucker out there. Need to fix my lengths a little bit here. Get them kind of in balance. Oops. Okay, see if we can get a little. See, this one might be kind of stretching the bounds of what I can do. Or not. It's not bad. Okay. And actually, sometimes the problem actually is not in whether you have a point there or not, but the location of some of those other points. So if we see here, this one's kind of like coming away from the curve a little bit. And obviously, this is a sketch on my iPad. I wasn't using any vector tools. So like there's nothing to suggest that my curve is perfect or something for sure. This vector, this Bezier curve is definitely going to be kind of more true to like what the actual mathematic curve is supposed to be. But if something is just looking more correct in my sketch than in the vector, then I can change it. And what I did there was I actually moved this anchor point a little bit further along this path. And I feel like that brought that back into a little bit more in line with what I had in mind when I drew the sketch. So sometimes it's just a matter of where the ones before and after are placed rather than whether you actually need a point right there. Okay, so I'm gonna continue on from this guy here, and I'm gonna skip this side point again, see if we can get away with it. There we go. Drag that guy out. Okay, and again, I think that the reason that this inside curve doesn't match with this outside curve as well as it could is, again, maybe because we got that point there. So I'm going to go back to my delete anchor point tool, hold shift, click. Already looks better, even just with the sketch, let alone the other curve. So liking these results so far. Let me come back to this guy, drag him back out just a little bit. Right. Nice. Okay. And I'll come over here, continue this on. Drag this guy out there. Boom. And then in a case like this, where I need to turn this, I could hold Option or Alt and then drag this way. Or if you didn't know, you can just click that guy and it'll break that handle on the other side so that it's just an angle now, or corner rather, I guess. And then I can complete that path. Boom. There we go. We got our first path done. I'm going to hit Shift X so we can kind of see that there, which just is the shortcut to swap the fill and stroke. And that's looking pretty good. And very minimal points, right? Boom. That's kind of a thing of beauty right there, huh? Love that. Awesome. Okay. Switch him back, click out of there. So this shape, when we go to the next one here, and as you can see, I've got these little shadow notches sketched into there in the sketch. I'm going to skip those for now. I'm not going to draw those in most places anyway. In some places, it's actually like the end of the path itself, like this guy. So I might leave those in. I may draw them up so that they overlap better. We'll just kind of treat them on a case-by-case basis. But otherwise, I'm going to just kind of draw right through them like they're not there. And we'll go ahead and subtract those later. So, okay. So for this next shape, I'm going to take the approach of plotting all the points and then going back and fixing the curves later. We'll see kind of how we feel like the speed difference is there. So I'll start here on this corner. Come over to this one there. Break that handle. Click there. Drag out of that one to start a curve. And I'll say we'll do it to about there. And I'm just going to leave that for now. And I think with this one I am just going to draw up through this shape. And kind of like see where this guy goes. And I'm thinking maybe like there. Drag out of there. Again, kind of like about there. Come over here to this corner. And again, I'm not paying attention to what these curves are doing in these segments while I'm drawing it. I just plotted the points, which is pretty quick. So now I can come back in, hold my command key, and I can kind of drag these segments into place. When your handles are like close to parallel, when your curve is close to a straight line, it kind of I don't know, the dragging the segment, it adjusts in such a way that it makes it really, really fine movements. So you're not just going all over the place, which is kind of helpful, but it can kind of seem like it's not doing the right thing in some cases. And so when you get really close to a straight path, it's it kind of almost acts like it doesn't know quite what to do. So you just got to kind of like play around with it. This guy, I can drag him into place. Boom. And then this one's going to be pretty close to where it needs to go again. So we see my mouse is, my cursor or whatever you want to say, is like moving quite a bit more to move very little. But I got it into place there. We'll do the same thing over here. Like that. And then this guy here. Boom. Maybe I came in a little bit too far there. Let me zoom in. All right. You guys remember when like zooming in on a big piece like this was like kind of like you had to decide case by case whether you wanted to do it or not because you didn't know if it was going to like beach ball on you and slow you down or hang. And now you can just like whoop, 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 zoom in and out like it's nothing. Thank you, Illustrator. That's lovely. And we can, as you notice, I didn't turn here and come out to do this little piece of the F. I just went straight through. I like to build everything in segments. That way I've got maneuverability later on. If I need to change, say, for instance, in this case, like how high or low this is, and maybe I want to move it up, maybe I want to move it down to fix balancing, whatever. I can do that a lot easier if these are separate parts for as long as possible. And there's nothing saying you can't keep them as separate parts forever, and then just duplicate everything if you eventually want to merge things with the Pathfinder tool or something. So, so I feel like plotting the points and then coming back to them went pretty darn quick on that last piece. Whoops. So I'm going to do that again, actually, and just kind of fly through here plotting these points because I want to make sure that we get as far as possible on this bad boy today. Okay, lovely. Say about there. Boom. Then I'll come back and fix my segments. Okay, maybe tweak that angle a little bit there. Perfect. Maybe bring this one back. There we go. Boom. Love it. Okay. O time. Okay, for O's and closed shapes that have a counter like this, which is what the inside of the letter is called whenever there's an inside that is kind of enclosed fully. I usually like to build them in two shapes and knock out the inside. You could do it, especially with one like this that ostensibly like kind of comes around here and then does a loop and then comes over here. If you were actually writing this calligraphically, I never can decide how I like to say that. You could do that. I always like to build it in two shapes. I might even, in some cases, if it's like a particularly clean ovular shape like this, I'll actually just hit L and grab my ellipse tool. And then I will just start with an ellipse, and I might need to fix that afterwards, but oftentimes I don't. Okay, so that's pretty good for that first shape. That actually fits pretty well. And then I'll do another one inside here. And as you're drawing one of these, if you hold the space key, you can kind of move it around so you don't have to like perfectly place your little bullseye or your little like crosshairs cursor in the perfect spot, because who can do that? I certainly can't. Okay, so we can see that the inside of that shape is much less so a perfect oval or ellipse, whatever you want to call it. So I'm gonna have to do some tweaking. So I hit A to get my direct selection tool, and we can see that this side here, I'm gonna just select this point. I'm gonna bring him out, and then I'm gonna have to probably tweak where these top and bottom points are. Bring those back just a smidge. Okay, that's pretty good. And then maybe even bring this guy a little further out. And then I can grab these segments here and kind of bring them more into line with where my sketch was. Cool. I like that. So now I will select this one. I could hit V and go to my non-direct selection tool, just the selection tool. Or I can keep my direct selection tool selected and hold Command, and it becomes the selection tool. So I've done that so that I can select this whole thing rather than just a single anchor or a single segment. And I'm going to hold Shift while still holding Command, and so I can select that one as well. Because while it looks like this is the outlined path of this letter that I have, it's actually just two totally separate paths in the layers, right? So what I need to do, now that I have those selected, is come to the Pathfinder. I'll actually open up the Pathfinder panel here, and I'm going to minus front. Boom. Doesn't look any different because I don't have any fills on here, but if I did, it would be just one big filled ellipse. And then after having done that, this one here that is our counter, which was the top in the layers panel, knocks out that space from the other one. So now it's just one compound path. All right, so turn my pen tool back on here, and I'll keep on going with this shape. I usually like to kind of start with a tangent, and then actually I'm going to try skipping that top point again like we've been doing. Works out pretty well a lot of the time, like that. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to skip all the points I don't want to do. Broke my path there. There we go. Let's see how this works. Not too bad. If we adjust things here a little bit. I keep deselecting things. Darn it. Okay. Go. Okay. And I'm going to try and come like right on the side of that guy. Don't really care about that because he's going to be within that other path there. Something like that. Okay, and then again, this is going to be filled as part of this part of the O shape. So I'm just going to connect that to the end there. Don't really care about what that looks like. It's all going to be filled right there. Boom. So done with that shape. All right, let's come over here to this L. There we go. Actually, you know what? I'm going to start across the top here. And I'm going to leave the segment fixing till the end. Okay. Something like that. And then I'm going to actually skip that bottom shape because I'm feeling reckless today, apparently. Something like that. Okay. Boom. The cool thing is you can always come back and just add a point if it doesn't end up working out, right? So mo points, mo problems. So I start with very few and then add if I need to, but often I don't, which is kind of cool. Okay, get that there. Boom, break that, connect. All right, now go back and drag my segments into place. Okay, so this is a case where this point needs to come down a little bit to create that curve properly. That's better. Okay, and And so much of this, guys, is just trial and error, like I only know about things like, okay, that curve's not matching up with my sketch exactly like I want it to. Is it a problem with the handles? Is it a problem with the angles? No, it's actually a problem with where that point is. And that has just come with a lot of practice of doing this and just kind of knowing ultimately what it ends up being that I have to do to fix certain things. And so I can tell them to you as I come across them, of course, and I am and will continue to. But yeah, a lot of this stuff is stuff that I only know because I've been doing this for quite a while. So if you wonder what the rules are about this kind of thing or that kind of thing, there may not be. And it may not be a thing that you should definitely ever get frustrated about, because a lot of things just come with kind of getting the feel for it and getting really familiar with the tools and sticking with it and doing a ton of practice. So, oops. That's what happens if you just keep on going without holding your Alt key to drag in a different direction. So this is a pretty long, but not straight chunk here on the side of this letter. So I'm going to try and come all the way down here to just before it starts to curve for real and see if I can get away with that. My snapping is messing with me here. Okay, I'm going to do what I did over there and just skip that bottom point, see how it goes. And I'm going to drag this one in place just so I can know that I'm not going to get messed up later. That's pretty good. It's getting a little sharp. I'm going to actually add a point into there. Can't win them all, guys. What are you going to do? Okay. Get those out a little longer so that smooths out a little bit at the bottom there. Okay, I like that better. Break that. Come here, drag down. All right. In spots like this where I've got an exit stroke from a previous letter ending right here, I like to, wherever I can, as I'm coming around here drawing this shape, I like to put a point right there. So that way I know that those are going to be good and aligned on those tangents where those meet. Boom. Okay. And then this is going to curve ever so slightly out again here. So I'm going to put one right there before the real curve starts. Get one here as well. Break that. Close it. Cool. Drag him into place. Put that a little more in line. Okay, that one's good. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see the length of this guy. And again, it's so close to straight that it's going to be very, very minimal movement as I'm dragging here. But it gets there. Cool. Did I do this top one yet? Not quite. There. Sweet. All right, so now we are moving right along, huh? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and select all these. Taking shape. Oh, we've got a little crossover here. It's good that I did that. I didn't see that that was going to be such a problem. Actually, I'm going to take this guy, move him over here. Now I have to move this handle as well, right? So there's that. And then probably I'll throw another point in here, move it right there. There we go. That solves that. Boom. Okay. Just like this. Shift X to get back to stroke. And all right. Here's an opportunity to just duplicate. You don't want to always do this because it's nice in a piece of lettering to have something anytime you've got repeating letters, for instance, and we'll get to this later with a different letter, But anytime you've got repeating letters in a piece of lettering, it's nice to approach them differently when possible to, create a little bit of visual interest and keep things from getting too repetitive or anything. But as you can see here, I definitely did that in the sketch too, almost certainly. So it is definitely already a thing that is happening in my sketch in this case. So definitely a good idea to just duplicate it here and save that time. Move that one a little bit further there. As we can see, this R, for instance, and this R were different down here and brighter. So those will be different, and we won't be able to just duplicate there. So that'll work when we get to that, and we will keep things visually interesting and not too repetitive. So I'm going to start there, and again, I'm going to put this side point right where that point was from the O. So I make sure that those are like super aligned and connected. Get one at the bottom. And I'm going to build this W like it is essentially two U's or V's, basically. Didn't need to do that because I'm currently not doing that, but whatever. Sometimes you just feel like it. Again, just kind of depends on my mood whether I do it one way or another. So my mood is changing mid-letter, let alone mid-lettering piece. Okay. So since this guy does a little bit of an S-curve, I'm going to probably not be able to just go up to the top. I'm going to probably need to stick another point right there. Drag these out a little bit so we can make sure that we get that back and forth here. I will, however, skip that top point and just come here and see if that works. And it does. I like it. Okay. Oop, gotta fix this guy. Can't forget him. Okay, so this is going to be a problem. I've got that point there on the same spot as the anchor from the O's exit stroke there, but it's not far down enough to successfulully get that curve at the bottom of the W. So instead of moving that one, I'm going to actually add another point down here. Oops. I have to have it selected and then add a point there. Move it there-ish. Fix those angles there a little bit, and then I can zoop, bring him into place, and now we're talking. All right, next shape. Probably have to do the same thing here since this guy connects so high in this path, but we will see if we need it. Okay, and we might not on this case. We'll try and do without it for now. What do you guys think? What are some of your biggest frustrations with using the pen tool in Illustrator, whether it be for drawing letters or not, whatever it is that you draw in Illustrator using the pen tool? What are some of your frustrations, if you have them, with either with how the pen tool works, or things you don't understand about it, or things you think you could be better at with the pen tool? Let me know in the comments what things you have trouble with, because I've been using this sucker for 15 years, and I feel like I've gotten pretty intimately familiar with it at this point. So I'd love to help y'all with anything that you're having trouble with. So let me know. You can also do so in the Discord after this show is over. I'm going to definitely pay attention to what's happening in there so we can kind of get a little mini community going, right? And you guys can have access to me in there. Okay, so this is a loop that comes around here, and I've done that with the outside of it. For the inside of it, I don't have to necessarily do that, right? It's not going to be open here. So instead, I'm just going to come into it like till about here, and then just turn and come back down here. So I'll do that. I'll hold my space key, bring it back down a little bit. A little too high. There we go. All right. What other Adobe Live community shows are you guys loving this summer? I felt like the art licensing class with my buddies from Good Type was really, really helpful. Licensing is something that I definitely could do a better job of thinking about more often, because I'm always like doing little stuff just for myself, or things for clients maybe that doesn't, where the design doesn't pan out and we end up going a different direction or something. And I've got like especially things that are like really generic, like thank you or something. Those things can be absolutely repurposed for licensed things where other people can use them for greeting cards or thank you cards or whatever. And I've got them just sitting in a folder somewhere collecting virtual dust, right? And so I'm definitely going to take some of their great tips and try and do a better job of letting some of that stuff work for me rather than having to work so hard myself all the time. We've got a little bit of an overlap here with this M, so I'm just kind of like guessing what's going on over here. Obviously, I drew it, but it's been a little bit. I actually drew this lettering in February, so it's been a while. But also, who's to say what's under there? I don't know. I'm not the expert on my own letters. How can I be expected to know exactly what was going on in my head anytime, let alone that long ago? In this case, we've got this nice shadow cut here, which means that this serif ends right about there. So I can use that to my advantage and plot that guy there. Dilo says a YouTube template tutorial would be nice. Tell me, what are you thinking about for a YouTube template? Do you mean like streaming templates, like some of the frames and stuff that I've got going on with my video views in OBS, or what? Tell me what you mean by that, Dilo, specifically, so I can help you out and answer your question. Fun fact, I've done guest streaming on Adobe Live a bunch of times in the past, but this is definitely the first time that I have done everything myself for streaming of any kind, outside of like just social media streaming, maybe a time or two. Like definitely my first time setting up an actual live stream broadcast like this. So it was very interesting. Frames, transitions, and banners, Dilo says. Yeah, so that was kind of just a trial and error process for sure. For this time, like I was just saying, this is my first time doing something like this where it's kind of like all created by me. So it was very helpful. Paco at Adobe, shout out to Paco. He definitely supplied some sample assets and stuff. Thank you, Dilo. He says I'm doing great. I have had a ton of fun and like to think that things have gotten much better over the last few weeks. But yeah, he sent a lot of sample stuff that I could kind of see how he was building those and like the sizing of those things and stuff. And that was really helpful. So I kind of used some of those as a starting point to build my own things. And beyond that, a lot of it has to do with the way that the different assets work in the streaming software. Like the one I'm using is OBS. That's kind of like one of the main most popular ones. It's open source, so doesn't cost anything, which is incredible. And it's kind of like, I think, sort of like the industry standard now, which is great. There's a lot of resources out there for it and how it works. great resources from Paco, from Adobe. And yeah, with that, it was just kind of like I'd create something, drag it in there, see how it looked, get things aligned, and yeah, just kind of playing around with it. And just I'm an endlessly curious person generally, so I enjoy thoroughly like any chance I get to really sit and kind of get lost in something and play around and figure things out and think, okay, what does this guy do? What does this thing, what does this setting change, and that kind of stuff. Okay, so with this M, I've got a combination here of a bunch of paths where I fixed them along the way and some where I just left them. So let's come back and pick up these stragglers here. Fix that angle, that's a little better. And here's a straggler. Boom. Boom. Awesome. Okay. E-time. So there's a lot of different ways that you can draw shapes or lettering like this in Vector. It's very different from the kind of lettering that I am maybe more known for doing, which is more script, very high contrast lettering with very thin hairline strokes in the thin parts, which I usually will approach a little bit differently. In this case, obviously, this is kind of like a serify script. I need to consult my buddy Ken Barber to ask him what he would call this, because it's technically like a script. It is upright, but it is also connected. So, but then there's also serifs happening. So I don't know. It's like a hybrid mutant piece of lettering, but still high contrast, of course. And these thinner areas are pretty thin. I wouldn't necessarily call them hairlines, but I could technically approach this the way that I often approach some of that other finer lined lettering, which is I draw kind of the skeleton strokes first, and then come back in and either use the stroke width tool primarily to add weight after the fact, or sometimes even build the shapes separately of the weight parts on top of that skeleton stroke. And this, I'm going to move this point over a little bit so that it doesn't look so misaligned with the top of the counter here. There we go. I like that better. But yeah, there's a bunch of different approaches. With this one, I am just doing the most simple, obvious approach, which is just literally drawing around the outside of this whole thing. The points that are the parts where that can get tricky is usually in these thinner parts where you're drawing two separate sides of them independently of each other, but ultimately you want them to look like they are following that same stroke, right? You don't want them to be getting like fat and skinny and fat and skinny and fat and skinny all along those strokes. So in my case, a big part of what helps me be able to do it like this with this kind of stroke and not have that wild weight shifting happening across those strokes is having a very thoroughly refined sketch to go from. So that way, as long as I'm following those clean edges from the sketch, then it's going to end up clean and balanced. Otherwise, though, a good approach can be to just kind of draw like right down the middle of those thin parts and through all the parts ultimately, and then kind of like make that a single stroke instead of a closed path. And that way you can actually like change the weight of the stroke to match the weight of what that section should be. And then you can expand it, and then you can know for sure that the width all along that section of the letter is the actual same controlled weight, right? So a lot of different ways to approach this stuff, and we're doing it this way, but you can do any number of things. So there's no wrong way to do it. Only more efficient ways to do it, I think. So, all right, I'm going to try and not correct paths again, see how it goes. Okay. Come up here to the top. Boom. Oop, close that. It's finally in the way. It's been open the whole time and not in my way, and then it finally was. Hidden path. Something like that there. Boom. Boom. I do find that when I'm moving fast and not taking time to fix those paths along the way, I am less likely to experiment with like skipping points like I did earlier on. It's one potential downside. Not a downside really, but maybe a less efficient way of drawing a path, possibly. I always like how you end up with these like crazy kind of Dr. Seuss-y looking shapes when you're not fixing those segments along the way and just plotting your perfectly aligned vertical and horizontal handles. They end up looking a little crazy before you fix them. Okay. There we go. Break that. Connect that. All right. Now we got a lot of fixing to do with this guy. It's gangly. Or maybe not Dr. Seuss. Maybe more like a Tim Burton style, like Nightmare Before Christmas type of look. Okay. Boom. 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 Too many booms. All right. That one. Here we go. I'm going to save that S-curve for last. Drag him into place. And him. Okay. Okay. Go. And the last one. Boom. Actually, I think that one just was close and not actually fixed. This one could go a little further. Okay. All right, now I'll fix this S-curve section here. Select it so I can see my handles. Drag him out. And him. Just kind of one and then the other until, oops, until I select something else. Until I get it where I want it. Okay, like that. And the bottom one. Okay. Boom. All right. Like it. Okay, so we are about out of time. So I want to show you really quick how I would go about drawing these little shadow notches here. So it helps to be able to see them, of course. I might, once I'm done and I switch this to a fill, I might bring my sketch on top of this one possibly or something. But there's a couple different ways you could do it. I'll often like select that path right there. Do Command C to copy, Command F to paste in front. And then I've got just this section here. And maybe I'll throw an extra point in it right there. Delete that point. And then connect him here. And that way I know that that path is exactly the same as the other one. It's not super important because ultimately this guy's going to be filled, this guy's going to be filled, and you could layer this shadow notch between them, and then it would be hidden by this guy, but I like to have it perfect. So now if I'm going to, oops, let me get my direct selection tool here. I'm going to select the entire layer and then deselect that shadow, and we'll Shift X to switch those, and then I'll Shift X to switch that one, and then we'll make it black. And there he is. Pretty cool. So pretty quick, easy way to do some of those. And we are then well on our way to doing this lettering. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this series. It's been an absolute blast to not only engage with you guys and share how I do a lot of my work, but also, you know, to show some of the truly fun and engaging work that I'm doing at my new day job, and the stuff that I will continue to do and explore. I hope this is not the last time that we're hanging out on a live stream type situation, whether with Adobe or maybe I'll start doing some of these myself even, who knows. Got the setup for it now and the know-how, right? So who knows, maybe bringing to you some other things here soon. So stay tuned for that, and follow me on Instagram, just Hamrick on there. And yeah, I look forward to engaging with you guys further, and you guys know how to get a hold of me now. So hit me up if you have questions about anything that we've done here on this show, or any other things that you're working on. I'd love to see it and to help you out. So with that, thank you again. It's been awesome, and see you around soon. Take care.